Hello guys, welcome to the movie recap review. Happy watching. The film begins in the vast expanse of outer space, featuring the autonomous starship Avalon en route to the colony planet Homestead 2 amid a widespread evacuation of Earth's inhabitants. As the vessel is 30 years into its 120-year journey, both the crew and the 5,000 passengers are in a state of deep hibernation within pods. While navigating through a meteor storm, the ship encounters a significant meteor, causing a diversion of power to the forward shields. Subsequently, a collision occurs, accompanied by a momentary power outage. Red alert screens illuminate the control area briefly, before swiftly returning to normal. Jim Preston, a mechanical engineer, awakens in his pod to the upbeat tones of a computer voice announcing the imminent arrival at Homestead 2. Despite feeling the expected confusion and weakness post-hibernation, he complies as his wristband is scanned, and the computer guides him to his sleeping quarters. The following day, as he contemplates his wardrobe for meeting fellow passengers, Jim attends an orientation session designed for colonists on Homestead. But puzzlingly, he is the lone participant. When Jim queries the computer-generated instructor about the absence of others, the cheerful digital guide struggles to comprehend his question. Jim, frustrated and alone, ventures to the main concourse seeking assistance, only to be met with unhelpful silence from the information kiosk. Determined, he locates an office where he can send a message to the Homestead Company, though warned about the hefty cost. Desperate for help, he dispatches a message detailing his solitary awakening. To his dismay, he discovers that it will take 19 long years for anyone on Earth to receive his plea. Realizing he's on his own, Jim resourcefully searches for manuals on the ship's equipment. While studying the hibernation pod manual, he grapples with the challenge of restarting the pods once the occupants have awakened. His attempts to access the crew pod area or the command center are thwarted as his wristband lacks the necessary clearance. Seeking solace in his solitude, Jim encounters Arthur, a robotic bartender. Although Jim can engage in conversation with Arthur, the android is limited to dispensing bar-related advice, such as suggesting a change if dissatisfied with one's current situation. Frustrated by the constraints of his general class accommodations, Jim takes matters into his own hands and breaches into a more luxurious suite, determined to improve his living conditions amid the vast emptiness of the starship. Enduring a year of isolation and growing increasingly desperate for companionship, Jim makes use of the ship's entertainment facilities, but the absence of other people intensifies his loneliness. Seeking an escape, he ventures to an area where passengers can put on spacesuits and go outside, albeit tethered to the ship for safety. Contemplating the unthinkable, Jim hovers on the edge of suicide by considering opening the airlock without proper protection. However, he abruptly stops himself and rushes back to the pod area. In a fateful twist, Jim stumbles near a pod housing a captivating woman, Aurora Lane. Delving into her recorded passenger profile, Jim learns that Aurora is a journalist on a quest for adventure and insight into the motivations of colonists. Intrigued and tormented by his profound loneliness, Jim grapples with the ethical dilemma of waking her up, realizing that doing so would condemn her to a life and death on the ship. Unable to endure the isolation any longer, he ultimately succumbs to his desperation, manually initiating Aurora's awakening and hiding before she can discover his presence. On her way to her cabin, Aurora finds herself alone and crosses paths with Jim. Despite his genuine connection with her, Jim hesitates to reveal the full truth about the length of his solitary existence. He discloses the challenges of his extended wakefulness without divulging the decision to awaken her. In an effort to shield Aurora from the harsh reality, Jim persuades Arthur, the android bartender, to keep his secret. Arthur, bound by programming, agrees to maintain the silence. As Aurora and Jim forge a daily routine of conversation, they explore potential solutions to repair the hibernation pods. Aurora, embracing her newfound routine, engages in various activities such as swimming, running, and delving into the creation of her own narrative. Curious about Jim's decision to leave Earth, she inquires about his motivations. Jim shares his passion for creating and repairing things, expressing a desire to live in a home he constructs with his own hands. He highlights the disposable nature of items on Earth, contrasting it with his vision of a more sustainable lifestyle. In turn, Aurora discloses her original plan of traveling to the colony, spending a year conversing with fellow colonists about their reasons for leaving Earth, and then returning home. As a gold-class passenger, she leverages her status to secure more lavish breakfast options than Jim's standard clearance permits. As their connection deepens over time, Jim gathers the courage to ask Aurora on a date, to which she enthusiastically agrees. Following a delightful meal, Jim introduces her to the spacesuit room, and together they don the suits and venture outside, experiencing the vastness of space tethered to the ship. Returning indoors, Aurora is filled with excitement, and their newfound intimacy blossoms as they retire to Jim's cabin, sharing a moment of love. In the ensuing days, happiness becomes a constant companion as they establish a routine of exercise, stargazing, and making the most of the ship's entertainment and dining offerings. As another year unfolds and Aurora's birthday approaches, Jim plans a special surprise for her, a handmade ring. Eager to celebrate, they head to the bar, where Aurora, believing in the transparency of their relationship, shares with Arthur that there are no secrets between her and Jim. Jim, unaware of Arthur's misinterpretation, agrees. Jim steps away momentarily, leaving Aurora in the company of Arthur, who commends Jim's choice in selecting her to awaken. Aurora, devastated and incensed, confronts Jim about the revelation. Overwhelmed by the betrayal, she insists that he stay away from her. One night, fueled by anger and anguish, Aurora enters Jim's cabin while he sleeps and unleashes her fury upon him. In the aftermath of the assault, Jim attempts to use the ship's intercom to explain himself, but Aurora, feeling that he stole her life, vehemently rejects his attempts at reconciliation. Simultaneously, the control room is becoming increasingly inundated with alerts signaling system failures throughout the ship. 2 years have elapsed since the meteor collision, and a new development shakes the routine of Jim and Aurora. Jim and Aurora notice the growing frequency of glitches affecting even mundane aspects like the cleaning robots. Gus Mancuso abruptly awakens as a deck crew chief. Gus reveals the gravity of the situation. Hibernation pods, which have never failed before, are now malfunctioning, indicating a major issue. The trio gains access to the command center using Gus's wristband, discovering that the ship's automatic diagnostics have collapsed. To identify the problems, they must manually inspect each deck. After Gus conducts preliminary tests, they all went to their cabins. Suddenly, a severe gravity failure occurs, putting Aurora at risk as she struggles in the swimming pool. The urgency intensifies as Gus uncovers a cascade of failures, revealing that the first issue occurred 2 years prior. The computer-generated timeline depicts a series of power diversions attempting to rebalance the load, but the mounting failures threaten to render the entire ship dead in space. The origin of the malfunctions points to the main engine area, but a perilous manual inspection is imperative to assess the extent of the damage. In a dire turn of events, Gus collapses, prompting Jim and Aurora to rush him to the infirmary. Placing him into the medical auto-diagnostic scanner reveals a grim prognosis. Multiple necroses are spread throughout his body due to the malfunctioning hibernation pod. With death imminent, Gus bravely accepts his fate, dons his uniform, and prepares for the inevitable. Facing the reality of his impending demise, Gus selflessly hands over his wristband to Jim and Aurora. This gesture grants them the necessary access to critical areas of the ship, empowering them to repair the escalating malfunctions as Gus finally lay down. In the engineering section, Jim and Aurora uncover a breach caused by a meteorite, compromising critical areas of the ship. Their attempt to open a door results in a harrowing moment as Aurora is nearly sucked into the vacuum of space through a hole in the hull. Quick thinking and teamwork prevail as Jim pushes a tablet to Aurora, blocking the breach, and uses a liquid sealant to further fortify the makeshift barrier. The area successfully pressurizes, revealing a new challenge: manual venting of the fusion engine exhaust. Despite attempts to activate the manual override, Jim realizes he must don a spacesuit and venture outside to rectify the situation. Braving the hazardous conditions, he enters the exhaust passage, discovering that a flap needs to be manually held open for the vent to work. Desperation sets in as Aurora, connected through radio communication, pleads with Jim not to sacrifice himself. In a heart-wrenching moment, Aurora, fearing for Jim's life, pulls the lever, pushing him out into the void as his tether snaps and his suit sustains damage. With a heartfelt goodbye, Jim drifts into the cold expanse of space. Aurora, refusing to accept his loss, rushes to don a spacesuit herself and embarks on a desperate search for him. Retrieving Jim by grabbing his tether, they return inside, only to find him unresponsive. Determined to bring him back, Aurora, using Gus's wristband and override code, manages to resuscitate Jim with the autodock. Relief and joy wash over her as Jim's life is restored. As life on the ship returns to a semblance of normalcy, Jim reveals to Aurora that, using the command override, he could put her back into hibernation in the infirmary. This would mean he would be alone again, and the prospect of their separation looms. Contemplating a future without seeing Jim again, Aurora decides to stay awake with him, choosing to forge a life together on the ship. In a poignant moment, Jim presents Aurora with the makeshift engagement ring he crafted earlier, symbolizing their commitment to one another. She accepts, solidifying their decision to face the remaining years of their interstellar journey side by side. Jumping ahead 88 years, the end of the voyage arrives as the captain and crew awaken to find a transformed Grand Concourse. Nature has reclaimed the once sterile environment with a thriving tree, trailing vines, abundant vegetation, and the presence of wildlife. A cabin, possibly housing Jim and Aurora's descendants, hints at the legacy they've built. Aurora's voice-over narrates her story, explaining how they cultivated a fulfilling life during their extended journey.
And that's the end of the story. I hope you liked it. Comment down below what movies do you like us to recap next. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time.